So many of you guys who watch me on YouTube, you might have wondered last week, where's Kirk been? How come there wasn't a new video segment on YouTube this week? And if you've been wondering that, it's because last week I ended up getting testing positive for COVID. No, it wasn't that serious. The first day was kind of rough. I think I had a fever. I felt pretty achy, but after that, it was mostly mild symptoms. I was mainly drowsy with some congestion for about a week. Either way, I figured it would probably be best for everyone if I took the week off. But also another reason why I took the week off is because I took the opportunity to just lay on the couch for a week and play a video game called Earthbound. For those who don't know, Earthbound was a game that was released in 1995 on the Super Nintendo, and it was re-released this year for Nintendo Switch Online members. And I gotta say, I absolutely adore this game. The more I play it, the more I want to play it. I'm actually not even finished with it yet. For those who've been watching me on Twitch, I've been streaming. I streamed this a couple times while I was recovering from COVID, just taking it easy, hanging out. And if you want access to that, you can do so by subscribing on Patreon or subscribing on Twitch to get access to that content. But yeah, Earthbound. I love the story. I love the music. I love the humor. I love the presentation. I already plan on maybe playing it again sometime, but little history on Earthbound. I first became aware of Earthbound when playing Super Smash Brothers games, particularly Melee and Brawl, which included Ness, the protagonist from Earthbound. And I remember seeing Ness and the stage that was based on the game and thinking, well, I've never heard of Earthbound. And it looks like something that's for little kids. It looks like a cartoon you might see on PBS or Nick Jr. How great could this game actually be? And it turns out there's a reason why I never really heard of Earthbound outside of playing Smash Brothers. Earthbound was actually a sequel to a game called Mother, which was released only in Japan for the Famicom in 1989. The English translation of Mother actually would get released in the United States around 2015 on the Wii U's Virtual Console. But the sequel to Mother, Earthbound, did get a proper North American release for the Super Nintendo in 1995, but it was somewhat of a commercial failure in the United States. A lot of people who know more about this subject have made YouTube videos discussing this. You got to think this was 1995. Back then, a lot of the cool kids were all about playing the blood and gore games like Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct and Primal Rage and Duke Nukem. But there was even a lot of competition from family-friendly games like with classics like Donkey Kong Country and Yoshi's Island. And even in the RPG departments, I imagine Earthbound had a hard time competing with the likes of Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy games. And again, this was 1995. This was when people in the, a lot of video game fans were already looking forward, looking to move beyond the 16-bit generation, getting excited for the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation. People have also talked about how their marketing campaign may have backfired. I guess they advertised the game as this game stinks with some wretched scratch and sniff stickers and whatnot. Either way, Earthbound was not a success in the United States. And even after getting more exposure with the first two Smash Brothers games, the sequel to Earthbound, Mother 3, the third and final installment in the trilogy, would also not get an English translated release for the United States. So thinking about this, I imagine this would be like finding out about Batman by watching the Justice League movie or one of the Justice League cartoons, and then watching The Dark Knight and thinking, wow, this is a really awesome movie, only to find out that it's part of a trilogy, but you cannot watch the other movies because they never got released in your country. Now, the first installment of Mother did get an English release, and it's also available for Nintendo Switch Online members. I actually tried it for a few minutes, and if I'm being honest, the game is pretty primitive for my taste, and I know a lot of you younger viewers might be thinking, well, the 16-bit version is pretty primitive. What's the big difference? And maybe I'm being unfair with this criticism, but I have read and heard from other fans of Earthbound that Mother 3, the sequel to Earthbound, is actually a really good sequel, and from what I've seen, the graphics and style are more in line with Earthbound than they are with the first one. So now I have this desire to play Mother 3, and my only option is to find a bootleg fan translation of the game. And thinking about this dilemma got me thinking about the issue of international trade and the whole Buy American mentality, which I think is prevalent across the political spectrum, maybe more so on one side than the other. But this is an issue that the philosopher Harry Binswanger talked about in his book, A New Textbook for Americanism.
Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book.
You can see the title of the essay, Buy American is Un-American. And in this essay, Harry Binswanger, as you can see, he says, collectivism is the premise of Buy American. We are to think of ourselves not as individuals, but as members of a group, the nation. An individualist defines his identity according to the values he has chosen. He is a philosopher or a computer programmer or a welder. He has a whole constellation of personal values. Perhaps he likes to travel, for instance, so he spends part of his income on that. As an individualist, he knows that it is his income, his choice, his life. Going on to say that the Buy American represents the altruistic ethics of self-sacrifice. It is the demand that you buy the product that is, it demands that you not buy the product that is best for you, but one that is more expensive, lower quality, or less reliable in the name of benefiting inefficient American businessmen and workers. The ethics of self-sacrifice depends on and reinforces the idea that men are brutes whose interests are in conflict. Anyway, I've often used video games as a concrete to explain why international trade is a wonderful thing and why the Buy American mentality is terrible. But only in a hypothetical sense. Like, what if the government decided to, say, impose tariffs on Nintendo products in an attempt to get people to buy Microsoft brand video games, like the Xbox, as a means to keep software engineers in Washington state employed?
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
But now I have a real life concrete of not being able to play a game I want, which is Mother 3. And let me be clear, I am not blaming this dilemma on any trade restrictions or bad economic policies. This is clearly a business decision on behalf of HAL Laboratories and Nintendo to not release the game for North America. This does not change the fact that I very selfishly want to play Mother 3. And someone operating on the Buy American mentality could easily demonize someone like me for wanting to enrich a Japanese corporation like Nintendo. On a superficial level, one may argue that seeking to buy Mother 3 from Japan is money that I am not spending on an RPG developed in America, and thus I am contributing to an American game developer going hungry to enrich a corporation from Japan. Okay, but I do not exist for the sake of ensuring that my fellow countryman is employed. If they want my money, they should try to make a superior product to games like Earthbound. And adding to that, as it turns out, games like Earthbound might serve as an inspiration to people in America who might go on to create games of their own. When reading about Earthbound and the history, I was fascinated to find out that Earthbound actually served as an inspiration for the creators of South Park, including influencing how they developed RPGs based on the show, like Stick of Truth, which is another RPG that I recently enjoyed. This does not mention the fact that Japanese companies like Nintendo ended up saving the video game market. Companies like Nintendo and then later Sony and Sega that rescued the video game industry in America after the market crashed in the 1980s. So right now, I'm disappointed that I cannot play one game, Mother 3. Now imagine how much joy I would miss out on if Nintendo released even fewer games, fewer hardware products in a world where the United States pursued a protectionist trade policy on electronics and video games. Just think about what the Buy American mentality does to people. They might ask, how dare you buy this new Nintendo Entertainment System when American companies like Mattel and Coleco are struggling to sell gaming consoles right now? How dare you buy a Super Nintendo so you can play games like Earthbound when Atari is trying to get back on its feet with the upcoming Atari Jaguar? And we even saw this attitude toward Japanese automakers for years. You probably still see this from time to time with Japanese automakers like Honda and Toyota. Even reading the former NBA star Grant Hill's recent autobiography, Grant Hill talks about how he gave away his Toyota Land Cruiser before moving to Detroit, noting that driving a Toyota in Detroit would be sacrilegious. And I thought about also mentioning how there are a lot of double standards we see with a lot of anti-international trade people across the political spectrum. On one hand, we have the Biden administration that stresses that we need to impose sanctions on Russia because they're ruled by a monster like Putin who is waging war against his neighbors. Meanwhile, Biden is planning a trip to Saudi Arabia, another country that's ruled by monstrous dictators, arguably worse than Putin, to, I guess, beg the country for more oil production. We've seen this from other Democrats begging Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. I've even seen some people go as far to suggest that we reopen trade with enemies and adversaries like Iran and Venezuela.
That's just not smart.
Meanwhile, we have trade protectionists from the right who have demanded for years that we impose tariffs and trade restrictions on international trade, even if it means Americans have to pay more for products. Now they're complaining that prices for gasoline have went up as a result of sanctions on Russia. In general, when talking about international trade, you have a lot of people making a package deal out of international trade, calling people like me globalists. Woo! But you know what? I want to keep it positive for today. I want to keep it positive. The positive of international trade, particularly with friendly, relatively free countries like Japan. You know what's American? Minding your own damn business and pursuing a good life. And sometimes it just happens to be the case that creators and producers outside of America will better suit your values and desires than other Americans.